Migrating to Australia, the podcast for all sorts of information about coming to Australia, visiting Australia, leaving Australia, behaving in Australia, getting sick in Australia, not getting locked up in Australia. That was our special one last week, wasn't it, David? I'm Grant Williams. I'm the boat driver, the bus driver, the pilot, and I'm joined every week by the Migration Titan, Australia's best and significantly nicest immigration lawyer, David Bongiorno. How are you today, David?
Oh, Grant, spring has sprung, mate. I'm very, very good, and I'm excited because we have a terrific guest joining us today.
Now let me do the preamble.
You do the preamble. Go for it, baby.
Internationally famous Australian underwear icon and actor, and son of a former premier. Got to throw that one in, Nick, to get that out of the way and never to be mentioned again. Mr. Nick Bracks. How are you, Nick?
Pretty good. I don't know about the international fame part, but I'll take it.
You can't walk away from that. The only reason that Neighbours is still made is because it's insanely popular in Britain.
So by technicality, I can get the international fame part on my title because it is big in Britain. So there you go. But
exactly, and actually we could stretch it out. You're huge in England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland.
There we go.
What we've got. We haven't got Nick in to talk about his acting fame and talent. We've got Nick in today to talk about mental health. COVID grips the country. The states and territories are in various stages of lockdown. And while the media cater to citizens and permanent residents, what we have got Nick on the show for is to talk about how people who are temporary residents, be they students or people on working visas, can avail themselves of mental health assistance and what they can do themselves, little tricks, little things that they can make their lives, little practices, little habits that people can use to make themselves on the way to recovery, make themselves better. I mean, Nick, tell me something. What is it about mental health that we're too scared to have open and frank discussion with? Because it's still taboo in a kind of way, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is that it's definitely improving. There's more awareness about it. There's more conversation about it. It's become more appropriate to talk about it. I think this whole pandemic has actually, in that side of things, probably been positive because people are just struggling so much. They're almost not having a choice. They're having to talk about their mental well-being, and you're hearing people that have, never had a problem talk about it. But there's still a long way to go. And I think also the education part is what's really important because, it's been awareness campaigns have been out there for a long time, but we're not educated on a mainstream level about how to understand our mental health on a practical level of what are things I can do to make myself feel better, to self-evaluate things, to, do things that are healthy for me daily, in the same way that most of us have the knowledge about the physical side of things. We know that, how to exercise, what that involves, diet, those sort of things. Mental health is no different. So I think, that's the most important part from my view of what people need to be educated about, because it's not practical for us to, afford to just talk to a psychologist, an hour a day, every day, which is the level you almost need if you want someone to, hold your hand through it all, which, not many can afford that.
Now, Nick, sorry, David, I just want to sort of set the scene a little bit, Nick, because when David messaged me and said, I want to get Nick on, I sort of went, oh yeah, why? I was unaware that you've sort of been in that place which sufferers of mental illness will be quite familiar with, and I've never talked about it before on here, and I've never really discussed it with David. But I had in my teens and through my 20s and 30s some pretty significant episodes, and I think you've been in that situation yourself, haven't you? And that's why we can hear a point of view that's valid, being that you're not Dr. Nick or psychologist Nick.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist, but I've had my own personal experience with it, and went through a really tough time, and was lucky to come through it. When I did come through it, I was in the media, had the opportunity to speak about it. That subsequently, sort of over the last 10 years, led to me, without really meaning to, sort of keep just working in the area, because I kept doing these talks, and it led to me creating my own seminar company and working with behavior change companies, and working with different psychologists to build the content that I build. But the reason I've got that drive behind doing it is, like what you said, I've had my own personal experience. I know the process I had to personally go through, and that I've now seen that many have to go through trial and error to find, okay, how can I navigate this overwhelming world that we live in, to find sustainable ways to look after myself daily. And we don't have education around that. So, that's an area that I'm, very, very passionate about doing everything that I possibly can do to help in.
People here on their journey to permanent residency and citizenship. So they might be temporary residents for 3, 4, 5 years, even longer. How, as temporary residents, can they become aware of the resources available? This is really something that people who are temporary resident students on working visas don't know how to access. What are some of the resources that they can access?
Yeah, it's a good point. There's many out there. I think if you don't know where to go at all, and as a base level, it's even just Googling mental health helplines, mental health resources. If you're talking about resource, do you mean resource on a level of I'm struggling and need help, in the sense of, yeah, well, then I would say, Googling it, go on to Google a helpline. There's Lifeline's one of them, Beyond Blue, these different organizations where for free of charge, you can call a helpline and talk to someone anonymously. And that's what I always recommend as a starting point if you're struggling, because from there, they're professionals who can give you the advice and information you need to go from there. And that'll open up, your knowledge base and your opportunities of what you can do next. So, I guess on that point that you're saying, I think the one thing that anyone listening to this, the one thing you should never do is nothing. If you're struggling, just do something, because, and it might not feel like a lot, but the first step's always the hardest. So if the first step is just telling a friend, telling someone, talking to, a teacher or whatever it is, or just calling a helpline, that one step is going to open up all the other pathways to, start dealing with it. If you don't do anything, it compounds in the other way, and it will become a bigger problem, and it will become, it'll build to a point where you can't control it. So it's taking that first step.
Someone may take the first step, and it's a great first step to call a helpline. You said it opens up pathways. What are the pathways it opens?
Well, you're going to talk to someone who, and again, who knows what the problem specifically they're talking about, but you're going to talk to someone who has all the knowledge and resource to then direct you to, okay, does this person need to see a psychologist? If they can't afford to go and see a psychologist, how can they go and get a mental health plan to make it more affordable? If they can't afford that, where else can they go? What other resources are available? What are some free learning tools out there? I've got my own programs where I make digital learning programs that are available to, organizations, schools, and the public. And I've made that very affordable, where someone can pay. And again, I'm not out there saying that's an alternative to seeing a psychologist. This is more a self-educational tool about practical things you can do, the same way as if I was wanting to learn about how do I exercise and look after myself daily and create habits around that, the same concept as that. So, there's so many different things. So the reason I'm saying that is it's such a complicated area, like so many areas, that you need a starting point of someone who can guide you. But, that's some of the avenues you could sort of start looking into.
You talk about practical tips you have in your package. Can you give us some examples of practical tips that can help people and put them on the road to bettering themselves through self-education and or professional help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think creating, the one thing I talk about all the time is it's creating a daily habit. It's not sort of, it's one thing to gain the knowledge of, here are some things now that I know that are good for me. And I know that they make me feel better, or that if I'm struggling and going through a hard time, this is going to help me. And it might be things like exercising, meditating, going and, talking to a friend, listening to music, going for a walk, journaling, gratitude lists, things like that we can do every day. So it's sort of, number one is understanding what's available. Number two is then from there looking at what actually works for me and makes me feel good, and why does it make me feel good. Number three from there is, okay, I've identified what works now. How do I make this part of my daily routine? Not just be reactive with it, not just do it a couple of days a week. In the same way that I eat, sleep, whatever else I do every day, this is part of my day, making it that embedded. And, that might mean that you're only doing it for 5 minutes a day or whatever fits in. But I think that is the number one most important thing, because if we just wait until we've got a problem, where we can avoid that. We can, it's not just about dealing with an issue when it happens. It's about trying to get more out of life and, have that foundation that when things do get bad, you've got this really, rock solid system that can help guide you through it. And I know, in my own personal life, that's helped me dramatically. I mean, I have these really, and this has been through trial and error, but I exercise daily. I've been meditating for 10 years. Every morning when I wake up, I write a gratitude list. And I can think of so many examples in my own life where I've had really difficult things happen that I can't control. And what I've reverted to is, I've looked at it in that situation and thought, okay, I can't control these things happening right now, but what I can control is these daily things that I do that I enjoy, that make me feel good, and no one can take that away from me. And that got me through it. And especially with what you're talking about, I mean, I've been living in Vancouver, and I'll probably go back. I've come back during the pandemic, but I know what it feels like now to, move and start fresh and not have the normal securities around you. And it's tough. And people doing, that are listening to this, if they're, it's not an easy thing. So having, again, the things for me have been, I've drawn back on the things that I can control and that make me feel good, so I can deal with these tough, uncertain things while that's happening.
People talk, when they're temporary residents in another country, the word stress and anxiety. Now, what are the differences between stress and anxiety?
I mean, they're pretty similar. I think stress is, I think they're very similar. Stress is probably a problem, having an actual problem that's stressing you, that's causing you panic. Anxiety is just this incessant thinking that, even if it's not logical, you can't stop your mind from thinking, and you're ruminating and going over things. So they're very interlinked, but and anxiety, is one of the biggest problems in mental health that we have in the world, more so than ever now, because people are overwhelmed, and I don't blame them, because it's pretty freaking hard to navigate the world with the amount of stuff that's out there. There's information everywhere, where social media is causing, huge negative problems in the mental health area. Just everything that's happening, it is overwhelming. So if you can't control that, you're pretty assured to then, in some way, fall victim of having a mental health problem.
David,
Grant,
I've got a question for you. If we just take it back a little bit to zero in on visitors, temporary residents and visitants, and I'm thinking perhaps students, they've got to take out their health insurance.
They do.
And I'm wondering whether psychological services are actually covered under those kind of policies, because in most cases, your health insurance, your basic health insurance here in Australia doesn't cover psychology. So are we perhaps having a gap for where long-term visitors to Australia are disadvantaged in a systematic way, because the safety net does what has been the historical problem with mental health? People can see a broken bone, they can see a bruise. It's obvious when you're trying to use your insurance and you've got a broken ankle or you need a knee reconstruction. But even here, you only get 10 psychological appointments as part of your plan in our national health service. So do we actually know whether the safety net as it's set up for international students when we talk about health and visitors, people working here, is it actually adequate? Do we know if mental health
the colleges and universities, private colleges and public universities offer in-house services, for want of a better term. GPs, I've sent many of my clients over the years to GPs to get mental health plans. After the mental health plans, if they're not sufficient, then I've referred them to psychologists or psychiatrists, even psychotherapists. Nick, that's something that a lot of young people and a lot of temporary workers wouldn't be so aware of, the capacity to avail themselves of, unless they speak to somebody like you or me, unless the difference between a psychiatrist, a psychologist and a psychotherapist. I mean, is there a way to see them in particular order if they don't work? Like if a psychologist doesn't work, do we go to a psychiatrist? And if a psychiatrist doesn't work or delivers an appropriate medical dose but can't take the mental help further, look at a psychotherapist? I mean, is there a chain, an order to follow in mental health? Because I've referred many clients over the years to psychologists, and that's always been helpful. But when do we start to look at psychiatrists or psychotherapists?
And yeah, I think for me, it all draws back down to, the bigger problem here is there's not mainstream education on this. We should be taught in schools, in universities, in companies, properly about how to understand this and how to navigate it. This should be common knowledge. And it's not going to change for a long time because the government, is going to need to spend copious amounts of money and resource on changing that. And that's why I think it's important that people with more leverage than myself are doing things to try and educate on the mainstream level. But it's highly complicated like anything. And a lot of it is trial and error. A psychologist would be the best place to start because they're going to be able to, on that base level, then talk to you and hopefully identify what the core problem is. And then you might find out from there, okay, you're suffering severely from anxiety. So the best step is we're going to make a plan around some practical, daily tools you can use to deal with that. Or they might find that, no, you seem like you've actually got a chemical imbalance and you need to see a psychiatrist to potentially be medicated, or you're in such a state that you're not going to be able to do the practical things to deal with this problem unless you're medicated for a short period of time. So you can then go and do these daily steps. So it's like, but there's a level, like anything, it's like sort of saying, how do I, what's the perfect way for me to go and, lose weight? It's like, well, there's a million things you can do. And we're not going to know unless we start trying and researching and understanding things ourselves about what's out there and how we work and what we respond to. So it's, it frustrates me that it baffles me actually that there's not more, common daily knowledge about this stuff.
In terms of tying it back to what Grant was talking about before, one of the things with the international student community and people who've come from overseas to work here is obviously the different culture, different language, and different views on mental health. There doesn't seem to be anything unless there's an officially clinically trained psychotherapist, psychiatrist, psychologist from Vietnam or China that can communicate with people from their home countries. How do we, as a society, cater or look after the multicultural elements of Australia? Because we're talking about mainstream, which is great, but if the Vietnamese student or the Chinese worker doesn't know how to access mainstream, how do they seek help?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have all the answers to that as well on that level. That's a tough thing. I think probably technology is the key to, making a lot of this stuff more accessible. And you see it, telehealth has been a thing for a long time, but it's becoming, during this COVID period, we're all having to if you are seeing a psychologist and using these resources, it's all being done online now, which the positive about that means as an international student, if they're here and they need to see someone that speaks their language rather than having to find someone locally, they can jump on, there's apps and resources where you can get matched and vetted to see, the best health professional or psychologist based on your needs. And I'm sure there would be resources where they can use that same thing to match with someone in their, home country while they're here, to be able to do that. And as you were talking before, I don't have knowledge on, in terms of getting government support if they were seeing it, even if they are seeing someone locally. I don't know how it works for an international student in that side of things, but in terms of, how they could approach it, I think that would be, a pretty simple and practical way to be able to just digitally get matched with, someone back in their country that they can speak the same language as.
People studying here suffer incredible stress, incredible anxiety. What have you got some practical study tips for those who are international students who are listening?
Some study tips?
Yeah, some practical tips to minimise stress and anxiety.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of this comes back to, tips that, the people globally need now, because people are struggling with the whole isolating and working from home. Because what happens is, and this is what happens with study, because, and it's the same as if you're running your own business or doing anything independently, you don't have to do anything at any particular point in time. And that's, sort of a luxury, but it's false economy, because if you don't create a routine and have structure, you then, humans crave a bit of routine, and we need to have that structure around us. If you don't have it, you sort of, everything blends into one, you don't work efficiently. So it's sort of my number one piece of advice would be create a really strict routine, get up at a similar time every day, have, like I was talking about before, have these healthy things you do for yourself. So it might be that you exercise first thing in the morning or at the end of the day, and that's, your release, and then setting, okay, my period that I study is 9 till 5 or 9 till 3, or I don't know, whatever it is. And in that period, that's when I'm not doing anything else other than working on, my assignments and uni work or whatever they're doing, and then have time outside of that for other things. So be really specific about, how you work and when you do, and rather than, the anxiety is there because we can't control things, and it's from uncertainty. So it's always looking at, and there are certain anxieties that we have to accept. COVID's the best example. We can't control that. So if I sit here and worry all day long about COVID, worrying about it's not going to change the reality of what's happening, but I'm going to feel worse. It's going to be very bad for me. It's not going to change anything else. So logically, that's not good. I can't change it. But there are other things I can do. I can be like, well, I've got all this time. I can use that practically and try and take control of other parts of my life. And that is going to reduce some anxiety, because it's going to empower me. It's going to fulfill me. It's going to give me more self-esteem. It's going to make me feel more confident and more likely to try and achieve other things. And, it builds in a positive way. So I think that would be a really important thing for, an international, for anyone studying.
If people are worried about a friend, I spoke to Grant the other day and he didn't seem himself, and he hasn't been himself for a long time. Nick, what are the signs a concerned friend needs to look out for to care for and help a friend who may be struggling?
Yeah, looking out for any change in behavior, withdrawing, mood snaps. Basically, in simple terms, it would be anyone that if you're seeing a change in behavior regularly, then start questioning it, because sometimes someone has a bad day and they might snap, or but if you're seeing over a prolonged period of time, or someone might, be having genuinely a bad day where they don't want to get out of bed and they don't want to face the world. And okay, that happens. But if this stuff's happening regularly, then it's like, okay, I think I need to talk to them now, and I need to look into this, and I need to, find out maybe there is a problem and assess it. So significant behavior change.
Nick, can I just expand that a little bit? Because I don't know how personal you want to get on this, but I had a cycle where I went through for maybe 25 years, maybe 30 years before it was picked up. And that behavioral change that we seem to be very, very familiar with now with campaigns like "Are You Okay?" and everything like that, I think ignores one really common indicator, and that's the high up that people have, the shopping sprees, the period of 10 or 15 days when you're younger of going out every night for ages.
Yeah.
That often is an indicator that is more out of character than someone having severe depressive mood swings, like the depressive down might not really show up until it's a crash. But the things like, I can remember I used to go out and I'd get fixated on things like going to find particular rare records, and collecting stuff. And then you'd go out and go on these they're crazy when you look back at them, but at the time people were just saying, "Oh, you're really into record collecting," or "You're really into rare books." But it wasn't. It was the upside of that pendulum that you were swinging on. And there's all sorts of ramifications to that, and spending money is one of them.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating and important point that you're saying, and that's 100% right. Like, it might be, it's fixating on things and obsessing about things, and OCD. People don't understand OCD properly, and a lot of people will just say, "Oh, I'm having a bit of OCD today," but at the end of the day, OCD and that compulsive behavior is you're channeling all of this uncertainty and frustration into one vehicle, whether it be, like you're saying, record collecting, drinking, it could be anything, working, and that's to make ourselves feel in control when we feel out of control. And again, I think to your point, it is probably a bigger part of it, that side of things where we it goes back to the thing that I just won't shut up about, which is we need education about this, because you see it everywhere. It's like people are like, "Oh no, it's part of our culture in Australia that we go and get drunk on the weekends and blah blah." It's like, no, it's not. It is because people are suppressed, people are unhappy, people have not been taught how to show emotion, how to show vulnerability. People have not been taught how to understand the psychology of what's going on with them. So they're so suppressed and unhappy that they get through the week and write themselves off so that they can forget and have that release rather than doing it in a healthy way. And it's not their fault. It's because they have not been educated about it. And sadly, what happens is it often reaches a climax where something really bad happens, or that person's life falls apart and they have no choice but to have to then fix it, which we don't want that to happen. We want people to be able to create these, this understanding earlier on before it becomes a problem. And again, I find it just insane that this stuff is not more common knowledge. But it's, as I keep saying, I'm not there pointing the finger at anyone. It's no one's fault. I didn't have this information. I learned it through having to go through some horrible things myself. And, having the only thing that got me through the other end was not, psychologists or that thing that helped, but it was really me having to actually identify the things myself. And I just think, on a societal level, things need to change, and not just a conversation, not just a campaign about, "Are you okay?" It's all fantastic stuff, but that's not enough. It has to change on a fundamental societal, level. This has to be ingrained in us.
Nick, did you remove alcohol from your life to recover?
I did for a period. I mean, for me, and this is again, such a complicated thing, but I was binge drinking. That was part of it for me, and as it is with a lot of people, and was having really negative impacts. And for a time I removed it, but then I found a balance where I know how I am, and I think having, if you have a fairly obsessive sort of mindset, if you create hard and fast rules about, okay, I can't have this now, you might need to sometimes, but I know for me it was like, well, if I do that, then what if I do go and, you might go and drink and then just completely go to town on it because you're making it this thing you can't have. Whereas I think if you can find a balance and be like, no, I'm not going to quit, I'm just going to have a better relationship with it, and maybe only cap myself at 2 drinks, and and change the whole behavior around it. I think that's more sustainable in my case. But again, it's different for everyone. I don't want to say any statements where it's, because this needs to be assessed by the individual.
No, it's intensely personal. And I wonder if you mind me sort of asking another question, and I'm asking it because it comes from within my experience and how I was able to get control. And I feel like I've been in control of a recurring condition for a long time. Did you have to really get to know yourself extremely well, like really brutally honestly, before you could feel like you were well?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's for everyone. I mean, the thing is, and I mean, yeah, 100%. Like people act out and do these behaviors because you need distraction, and it's like, I need what's next. And whether, we tie our identity to money, fame, validation, just having constant, stimulation, whether it is going out and doing these sort of things, you're not going to be able to move away from that problem until you are comfortable with yourself and you have to look yourself in the mirror and understand, hang on. And it's all storytelling. We're feeding ourselves these things. I'm not going to be okay unless X, or I'm not enough unless I have X. It's like, well, you're telling yourself that story, but is that story true? Maybe it's not. Maybe you are okay just being who you are, and the world's not going to fall apart if you don't do this behavior or whatever it is. And it's a huge problem. And I think that's something, again, I mean, with this pandemic, suicide is going up by a huge amount. Mental health problems are through the roof. And a big reason because of that is all our vices have been removed. We can barely leave the house here in Melbourne at the moment. And most people are used to distracting themselves through any means possible. So if they're having to sit and just confront and think about, hang on, who am I when I remove everything? Oh no, I don't want to think about that. That's too confronting. No, I need something to distract me. I honestly believe it is impossible to be truly at peace and happy in life unless you can be just okay with yourself without having anything else. We should want to have other things, but you've got to be able to strip everything back and know that you're enough just right now as you are.
Can you spend time just on your own reading a book and feel happy, like especially in a time like this where as you just said, we can't go out and distract ourselves? There was something to be said for the times where the only thing you could do was either write things down or appreciate the nature around you, or read a book, or make music, not listen to music, but the time where you would have to make music or make something in the shed. I reckon we lost a whole lot of that, and that hopefully this will be an opportunity for us, because it could be extended. We could be doing similar to what we're doing now for 12, 18 months, 24 months,
Could go on for, we don't know. But yeah, like you say, I think it'd be nice if that was a byproduct of this. And I think for some people, I think it's really the people that are ready for that change. It will have a lasting impact. Probably the majority are not ready and will fall back into old behaviors. But yeah, I mean, to your question, I can. I'm very good, probably I've been preparing for isolation for the last 15 years because my whole career I've been, pursuing, I was modeling, doing my own businesses. Now I pursue acting and run my mental health organization. And a huge amount of that involves, being alone. And I feel very fortunate that, I do for a living stuff that I would do if I didn't get paid for it anyway. So for me, it's not that hard. I'm spending time just like watching movies. I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things to do, and reading scripts. I'm filming auditions. I'm building my own podcast at the moment. And whether that, even with the podcast, it's like whether that actually anyone listens to it or not, I love doing it because I just get to like talk to interesting people. So it's like, these are, I love all that stuff. And like anyone, of course, I want to have success in life and have all these other things, but I also just enjoy, you know, being able to do these things regardless, which I think is really important.
Nick,
Yeah, sometimes we interesting people on our podcast.
What's that?
Nick, something you mentioned, Nick, earlier, and it's something almost certainly people could do in life. So is meditation. What form of meditation did you undertake? TM or what form of meditation?
I did do TM. So I learned TM, Transcendental or Vedic meditations, and 10 years ago. And it's actually worked really well for me because I've got, you know, I think if something, there's quite a structure to it where, you know, you've got the mantra, you're sitting there 20 minutes in the morning, 20 in the afternoon. I mean, I still do it to this day. I often miss the afternoon one, so I'll do the morning, and I find it difficult to, you know, get both in, or things happen and, you know, whatever else. But I found it, it's just so beneficial to give yourself that time to be still. And half of meditation is about just letting go of control, because often you find you're doing it and my mind's still racing, and it's not probably working as well as it should. But if you can learn in those times to be thinking, okay, who cares? You know what? I don't have to get this perfect. We can't get anything perfect in life anyway. I'm still doing it. That's enough. And that's what that's the core teaching of what a lot of meditation is meant to be about. There's no perfect way to do any of this stuff. It's about just letting go of things, really, and giving yourself your mind. You know, it's not a spiritual thing as well. A lot of times in my mental health work, I'll do a talk in a company and I start talking about meditation or mindfulness, and people think that means you have to go and, you know, disappear, climb a mountain, shave your head, chant for 30 years, and you know, do all these weird things. It's like, it's actually at the core of it, it is scientific, because it's just about training your mind to be able to be present and focus on one thing at a time. And you know, there's so many apps and free information and ways to do it. So yeah.
One of the words that gets bandied about with meditation is mindfulness. You just mentioned it yourself. What's the difference between meditation and mindfulness?
Well, meditation is an actual, you know, the practice of sitting there and, you know, like we talked about just then, whether it's through TM or you've got an app that's guiding you through, you know, visualization, guided meditation, whatever. Whereas mindfulness is more a line of thinking. So I guess an example of that would be being mindful. I'll give you an example from my own life. I used to be incredibly shy and had low self-esteem. And in university, I had to do, this was just when I was coming out of going through a really rough time, and we had to do public speaking. I had to do sort of 10 in that first semester, and I'd be in front of, you know, 4 or 5 people, so a tiny room. And it was my biggest fear in the world. And my mind was telling me, you're pathetic, Nick, you're not good enough, you got nothing good to say, you're going to stuff this up, everyone's going to laugh at you. And I was actually vomiting before I'd talk in front of 4 or 5 people. But because I had to do this and I'd been through a bad period and I'd stuck to doing it, and I did a pretty bad job. I'd be sort of, you know, mumbling, staring at the floor, and may as well been speaking another language, but got through it. And I realized, hang on, what's happened here is not that bad. I did a bad job and still the world didn't end. And what I learned was that it was just changing this story. My mind was telling me a story that wasn't true, and I had control over that. So that's mindfulness, you know, being able to evaluate things. You know, right now I could be sitting here talking with you guys, and my mind could be saying, Nick, you know, you've got to, what about this other thing? And you got to do this and you got to do that. And then it's being able to bring it back to, okay, great. You know what? I'll do those things when the time's right. Right now that I'm having this conversation, I'm going to focus on that. And, you know, that's what mindfulness is.
So they can go hand in hand. How do you find somebody to teach you mindfulness, and how do you find someone to teach you meditation? Are there any organisations people listening could look out to?
Yeah, there is an Australian meditation. Can't remember what it's called. There's a body of accredited meditation teachers. I mean, there's so many ways you can do it. I guess there's, you know, apps. Headspace is one of the really popular ones. You know, there's a whole bunch of free apps out there. You could really, the same thing really, Google meditation or mindfulness and things will come up. So it's just trying to find what is, you know, quality through that. But there's information everywhere.
Nick, I want to jump in just on that and be my curmudgeonly other point of view kind of thing here.
Yeah.
I understand what you're talking about with mindfulness, and I like to use different terms because mindfulness has now been taken over by an industry, and I don't think that the industry is always conducive to what the desired outcome is. Mindfulness is being aware of what's the processes that are going on in your own thinking, but also being aware more generally of what's going on in your local world and in the wider world, and how you kind of fit in on that. And meditation is a tool to help you get in there. But I think some of the basics need to be done before you jump into like I don't want to say meditation, but I think people latch on to solving issues with something that sounds groovy. When I know that David had these in the list of questions for coming up, something basic like you mentioned really early on, getting on top of your sleep patterns, being regular about when you get up, being regular about eating good food and taking a lot of crap out of your diet can often be better at settling down what's going on with your brain than needing to worry about buying some candles and getting a yoga mat and some crystals, you know. And that's what I talk about the industry. There seems to be a fashion around mindfulness when the building blocks for good mental health are much simpler than anything like that.
I mean, there's so many levels to what you're saying there, but I guess number one to, address what you've said is 100%. Capitalism has basically gone to town on this word mindfulness and created, I can't count how many yoga things there are out there and apps and everything. So when I'm, saying there's free resources, the complication is, how do you find what's good? And I don't have a, quick answer to that, but it's like what happens. I've seen it, I work in mental health. I've been doing it for over 10 years now, and still the core of what I do is pretty simple. It's not complicated. It's going and doing a talk and showing vulnerability and creating a forum where people can open up. But during this pandemic, especially, I'm seeing, every second person in business trying to start mental health companies. And it makes me feel a bit ill because they have no knowledge about it. They have no interest in helping in the area. They're purely looking at the economics of it. How can I capitalize on this current need where people are suffering? And I actually find it terrifying, because doing these things in the wrong way can be more detrimental than doing nothing at all. And it's also a symptom of just the lack of self-awareness in the world, that comes down to mindfulness, like we're talking about, that people are just trying to do whatever the hell they can, walk over anyone they can to just get a leg up in the world, rather than just first of all doing the work on themselves and working out, what do I really want, what do I actually care about doing, even if I don't make a lot of money out of it, what do I enjoy? And like you said, the other part of it is, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Mental health is a hugely complicated area. There's no one part of the puzzle. Like, mindfulness is one part, meditation is one part. These are all important things we should be doing. We should be becoming more self-aware. But absolutely, as you said, before any of them, it is fundamental. Look at the absolute basics. Am I eating well enough? Am I getting enough sleep? If you don't sleep enough, there are huge statistics and huge research showing how much that leads to depression and anxiety and all the negative things that come out of it. So it's looking at all parts of the puzzle and having the knowledge to. And again, that's like what I really care about in my work, is just trying to empower the individual and let them know, what, you don't need to spend much money for this stuff. You don't need to go and drastically change your life. All you need is a bit of information and some simplicity in a world that's crowded with noise to try and take your money off you. we can all do, simple things. Like we said, get enough sleep, exercise every day, move in some way, still your mind, do things that, help your self-esteem, try and, do things for other people as well. So it's not all about yourself. It's like all stuff that's available to everyone, no matter what our status is, where we are, who we are, but anyway, it's like I could talk about this stuff all day because there's so many levels to what, to these things. So
empowering the individual, that's what Grant and I try and do for Migrating to Australia. It's a calling for us. Is it a calling for you?
Is it a calling for me to
empower the individual? Is it a lifelong mission, or does it have an end date?
Oh God, no. Like, so, I mean, I feel really fortunate because I didn't have purpose for a long time. And I mean, as a kid, I wanted to be a professional athlete, trained obsessively, that's a whole nother story. But again, it was that mindset of didn't know why I was fixating, but ran myself into the ground, then went through a bad period, and I wanted to find purpose. And I did through trying things. I feel so fortunate that I have the mental health work I'm doing, and then I have the entertainment side of things. And I love acting and performing, and, I'd love to have a bigger career in that. But regardless, everything that I do, even the acting career that I love, it all feeds back to this lifelong goal of I just want to make change in mental health. And I don't really care how. I don't care how that sort of formulates. I don't care how big it is. I don't care, it doesn't have to be specific. It's just I want to make change. And if I have a bigger platform, I can make more change. But I always just have the psychology of, even talking to you guys right now, if what we're talking about here helps one person, then this has been 100% worth it. This conversation, making more of a change in the world by helping one person through this conversation than a lot of multi-billion-dollar companies make, selling crap into the world. So that's really, for me, I keep it simplistic to that point. And until the day I die, I want to keep doing that. I think the thing I say all the time is, if we could all as individuals have that mentality, imagine how much change would happen in the world, because change doesn't happen by, I think the government and society and, it's like throwing money at all these things and trying to do all these different things. That's never going to make a bigger change than just each individual empowering themselves and doing those little things. That collectively is how you actually make a big change.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely, what a mission, what an aim. I love it.
Nick, what was your athletics pursuit?
Wasn't Geelong Football Club playing footy, was it?
Originally it was. As a kid, I wanted to play AFL, and I played at a pretty high level, and then I became so fit because I was so competitive. I was winning all the middle distance running races, and then I started competing in middle distance running and was competing at an Australian level at one point, and basically ran myself into the ground, had a really bad knee injury when I was 16, 17, and couldn't really come back from it. So, but that was what I wanted to do. Yeah, initially in life it was AFL.
Acting is something that Grant and I appreciate. We're movie fans ourselves. What's your favourite movie?
Ooh, it's a tough one. I love so many different films. I'm a huge sci-fi fan though. So I would say if I had to pick one, I would probably say the Matrix, the first one.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's so many I love, but I do love the Matrix because, number one, it was groundbreaking for, I think it was 99 when it came out. The level of, the philosophical elements of that and just the layers to it and just, I don't know, I think it's a beautiful combination of so many things. So I've seen that a lot of times, but I mean, there's so many films that I love.
Do you draw any inspiration from Keanu? Because he's quite wonderful in that film.
Well, you know what, Keanu, so I'm a Lebanese background. Keanu was born in Beirut, so I can find that correlation there. But I
love it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do. I obviously, I sort of follow all these different actors and try and read their stories and look at where, draw inspiration from it. And because it's a tough industry. I mean, it's like the entertainment world is one of the hardest industries because there's no certainty. You get rejected for a living. You're putting yourself out there. I did an audition last night, actually. I was having to film this audition, and because of COVID, I had to have my friend reading through Zoom. So I've got him propped up there. I'm framing the whole thing up. I'm standing. It's just this weird thing, and you're sending these things off, and you're never hearing anything unless you get the job. And you need to be looking at the people who have had success in it and reading their stories about what they went through and how they sort of did it to remind you, that to keep going with it. Because it's a crazy industry, but it's at the same time, love doing it.
What about, I mean, you're a businessman as well. You have your business, and it's a very socially positive business. What about funding your own projects?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your own film projects?
Yeah. Well, I'm involved in an Australian film that it's not my own project, but I'm helping with, pushing that side of things and using my business skills for that. And it's a really sort of, grassroots project. It's actually got mental health themes in it. So I have produced my own, short films, little comedy clips to draw light to different issues around, social issues that are ridiculous in society. And 100% have planned, when the time's right, to try and start making my own things, because it is the perfect combination where you can use, the business skills with that entertainment, side as well. Which I think you sort of need to more than ever. You got to create your own, like doing a podcast. In the past, to go and even just get a conversation like this out into the world, you'd have to be asked onto a radio station or whatever it was. Now we can go and create our own stuff, and we've got the resource and technology to push it out there. So I think it's more important than ever that to in whatever realm you're in, try and create your own stuff.
Now, Nick, yeah. I'm gonna open up the plug section now. Tell us about the podcast, and what drew you to the podcast medium. Why did you choose it above, say, making one of those abysmal Saturday afternoon travel shows?
Yeah, so anyone listening to this, the podcast is called Move Your Mind with Nick Bracks, and love anyone to check it out. It's on Spotify and iTunes. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. I hadn't done it because, like a lot of projects, you're busy with other things and I want to do it, but you sort of get caught up. So sort of the start of this year, I really decided, no, I'm going to do this. And the reason I chose to do a podcast is, for me, it's a really natural extension of what I've been doing anyway. I go into companies, I go into schools, and I just talk. And I feel like it gives me another medium to have these authentic conversations and be able to get them out to, potentially a more varied audience than I can if I'm just in a room in one particular organization. And what I'm trying to achieve through doing it is just bringing on different guests and, people. A lot of them are people that are have a fairly big profile in society, but rather than having the typical conversation with them about their career and all the fluffy things, it's let's have an authentic chat about you and the hardships you've been through and what you've learned, and bring that to the listener. So I think it interests me rather than doing a travel show like you're saying. I think I find it much more interesting to just have these conversations than do more fluffy things.
Are you producing it yourself?
I have a producer that's working with me, so I've got like an editor producer who's come on board to help, which has been a godsend because I'm not great with technology, and I mean I don't even want to attempt to be editing and cutting them up because he's really good at doing that. So I'd rather focus on doing what I know how to do and interview people, and let the editor do that side.
Have you had a crack at that side of it? That I'm just interested whether you started with the aim of being the jack of all trades and doing it yourself, or whether you straight away reached out for someone to help you with it. I've
definitely had a crack, but from the beginning, I did reach out to someone to help, just because I sort of, I have done a few, and I'm editing even on a small level, audition tapes on iMovie, etc., that kind of stuff all the time. And I've done audio projects in the past. So I have done it and I know the process, but I just thought, well, I'd rather have someone, help me do it.
Nick, my final question, Nick, you speak to various audiences, adults, children, teenagers. Who are most receptive to your message?
It's tough. I'd say like high schools are very receptive. I go and do talks to, sort of year 10 to 12 students. They're receptive. And I think because, if I'm telling my story, they can relate to it. And I tell it in a way where I'm not really, holding back. I just be honest and make it very raw and vulnerable. And it's one thing, to this day that I think is the most important thing about doing that. So I'd say that age group. And then, it's probably the younger age groups relate the most. But having said that, I've been in factories where you're talking to these, 60-year-old men that have worked in a factory for 30 years, and I'm walking in and, you feel like you're going to get hit. They're like, who the hell is this young kid trying to come and like tell us what mental health is? Go bloody. But then, you just take the piss out of yourself and show vulnerability. And it's kind of beautiful that you eventually see these guys opening up. And, again, I think it's like, it's not because I'm doing anything special. It's just because people actually want to see realism in the world. And I actually think it's a crazy thing that it is out of the ordinary for someone to see vulnerability. It should be what we're doing all the time.
What's the best feedback you've ever had from anybody for your work?
Well, I've had a lot of amazing feedback. Again, I don't think it's based on me being amazing at anything, but it's more nice to hear because it sort of, I'd actually reel back on doing the talks because I was doing it. It was taking off to the point where I was doing 150 plus a year, and I was burning out and starting to affect my own mental health. And the thing that drove me to keep doing them even then was you'd be just exhausted and you're having to put your emotions on the line. So I did 8 1-hour talks in a day at one point. And I kept doing it because every time you do it, you then see someone go and actually speak out and get help, and you're like, oh, it's worth it. That keeps driving you. But I mean, I've had things on the really extreme level. I've done a lot in factories, and we had one where it was a Friday afternoon, and we did this talk, and after it was done, this guy came up to me and the HR lead of the company, and he was sort of the leader. He was seen as a leader in the organization. In his home life, he was seen as never had an issue. He had everything together, and he came and told us, I've got an active plan to end my life in 2 days. And he had methodically planned it all out. And he opened up because we gave him that forum, and he was directed to get help, and not only got the help he needed, but he ended up going back into work and sharing his own story and helping other people. And, seeing things like that, I think about that all the time, because it's just like, bloody hell, like, again, it's not because I'm special or I've done anything unique. It's just to be part of, doing that. It reminds you that how important it is that we do have more conversations like this.
Actor, mental health advocate, Nick, you've been great. Grant, you got any more questions?
Well, Nick gave us the opportunity earlier on to end the podcast on a migration note. Double barrel question, Nick. Why did you choose Vancouver as your semi-permanent residence, and what did you find the big difference between Melbourne and Vancouver, considering many people would say that there's a lot of similarities between the Western Canadians and Melburnians?
Yeah, true. And there are similarities. I've traveled a lot, but lived in Melbourne most of my life, and I wanted to change and wanted a new challenge. And on top of that, the film industry in Australia is not that massive, whereas Canada, Vancouver's actually, they call it North Hollywood. It's like an extension of LA. They almost make more production in Vancouver now than they do in LA. So I was sort of weighing it all up and thinking, okay, where's somewhere I really want to live that, and Vancouver, I just find like British Columbia, I think is one of the most beautiful parts of the world. It's ridiculous. You know, you're in the middle of the city in Vancouver. You look up, you see ice-capped mountains and lakes and forests, and it's never ending. And in line with that, you've got one of the biggest film industries. So for me, it was like this perfect combination compared to moving somewhere like LA. So it just ticked all the boxes, and you know, I've fallen in love with the place. It's just, you know, it's beautiful, and it's like, it is similar to Melbourne in the sense that it's such a well structured city. You can sort of walk to all the main pockets of it. Everyone's super friendly. Canadians are easygoing. So it's sort of, for all the stuff I'm doing with my mental health work and the acting, it's really got it all packaged into this city that's so livable and so beautiful. You know, you can be 10 minutes out of the center of the city on the top of a mountain skiing if you want to do that. So it's like, it's crazy.
Nick, where should people reach out to you if they need to? What do you want to highlight?
Yeah, so if they can just go to my website, nickbracks.com, nice and simple. And that's also got links directly to the podcast. On there, we've got, if people sign up to my website, you get automatically sent a free tip sheet, which it's sort of a bit of a summary of a lot of the stuff I've talked about here, practical things that you can use from that sheet to use daily. So I'd recommend that. And then we've also got, you know, programs on there. One of them is called Mental Health Masterclass, where it's a comprehensive, you know, video-based learning program, and we have toolkits that come with it. So that's all available on there if they want to check it out.
Now, I got a message on my phone, so I don't know if you noticed that we did get a couple of people pop in and have a look on our live view. Now, I like this one, Nick. You'll probably laugh at it, David. You probably won't get it. And the message is pretty simple. That's not the Bracks from Home and Away. It's true. You're not the Riverboy Bracks.
That's very true. And funny fact, because I was on Neighbours, but I also auditioned before I got the Neighbours role. This was years ago, like 5 years ago, or probably 10 years ago almost. I auditioned for the role of one of the Bracks brothers on Home and Away. So didn't get it. I thought they would have given it to me. I already had the right name for it. But anyway,
it was well picked up there, because I'd even forgotten that there was a character called Bracks in.
It's a funny thing.
But there we go. David, where can people reach out for migration advice?
The best way, the quickest way to reach out, if anyone wants to talk directly, is via my Twitter, and that's at David Bongiorno, DAVID BONGIORNO, all one word, at David Bongiorno, and we can then organise a discussion face to face.
And of course, you can go to leave a comment or anything on migratingtoaustraliapodcast.com. And that is a way you are guaranteed to get some follow-up. And I'm going to be extremely self-indulgent. Thebirdemergency.com.
Good, go for it.
That's where you can find Australia's best podcast, actually the world's best podcast on rare and endangered birds. And it's featuring an amazing podcast host called me.
There you go, mate. Well done. Nick, have a great weekend.
Same to you guys. Thank you for the chat today.
Ciao, mate.
Nice
Ciao.
to meet you in digital land, Nick, and all the best with it. You're doing great work.
Appreciate it.
Ciao.
Good chatting. Bye.
And thanks everyone for listening, and those couple of eyes who popped in to watch us. And we love the comments. Maybe we'll track down the real Bracks for another time. See you, David.
Ciao, mate. Bye, Grant. Bye, Nick.